Evil Dead Burn has successfully burned itself in the memory of all Evil Dead franchise fans as a movie that expanded the lore and kept the horror high up despite having way less spilled blood than its predecessor. There was gore, of course there would be gore in an Evil Dead film, but as I said, the best aspect of the movie is how it took the established lore from the franchise, connected it with Evil Dead Rise, and finally told us so much more about how the Deadites work, what exactly they want, how they operate, and most importantly, Burn tells us about the one thing that the Deadites fear the most, and how they seek to destroy this thing. Now, this is an ending explained video, so there will, of course, be spoilers, albeit some really juicy ones. So you shouldn't mind facing them. And with that out of the way, let's begin.
Thought I'd let you have all the men in this family to yourself.
I know I am being slightly contradictory here, but let me quickly talk about what happened at the beginning, because that little part at the lake is extremely crucial to the ending itself, and like the beginning actually connects to the post-credits scene. So much like its 2023 predecessor Evil Dead Rise, this new movie starts at a lakeside spot, and it is the very same spot from the beginning of Rise. This time around, we have two friends named Leo and Jared, played by Tapiwa Soropa and Keanu Karim, respectively. Leo gets a phone call from his girl and he leaves to attend it, while Jared continues fishing until his fishing stick catches a skull of a woman. But if you look closely, the skull was missing most of its scalp. And remember who lost their scalp in Evil Dead Rise? Well, this was the first major hint of how the beginning was going to connect to the post-credits scene. Jared obviously drops his fishing stick and panics, since Leo was nowhere to be found. He probably tries to call the cops, and a number of hooks and fishing ropes fly out of the lake and bind Jared in a scene that was very reminiscent of the chains that Pinhead usually unleashes on his victims. And the next thing we know, there's Jessica right there, Deadite Jessica, who completely destroys half of Jared's body and leaves him for dead. But who's Jessica? Well, this is where the 2023 movie comes in. At the end of that movie, we see that cousins Teresa and Jessica's boyfriend Caleb, are planning a getaway to a lakeside cabin in the woods. Jessica used to live in the same building as the Bixler family, and Ellie Bixler, the mom of those three kids and the sister of Beth, who becomes the Deadite and is later sent into the chipper by Beth at the parking lot. But as Jessica comes to the parking lot, she is attacked by an unseen force. And after reaching the lakeside cabin, Jessica becomes unhinged, rips off her cousin's scalp, before killing Caleb as well. But the connections do not stop here. After doing Jared and Leo, Jessica walks out of the water and stands at the side of a road from morning to night, waiting for a specific car to arrive, and when it does, she ensures that the driver crashes into her. And yes, Deadite Jessica selected this car for a very specific reason. She wanted something that this man could provide. What was it? So Jessica actually has a link with the main characters of the movie. Through Hunter Duon's Joseph Price, we are introduced to his grandfather, Benjamin Price, who used to be a part of a very cult-like order called the Circle of Wise Men. You see, Joseph was in the process of writing his fourth unfinished book and was using his grandfather's logs as an inspiration. Since he had been less successful than his older brother, Will, their parents, Edgar and Susan, had given Joseph a secluded family house where the family used to earlier live. One day, during his research, Joseph listens to a couple of logs left by Benjamin, and from these logs much can be ascertained. So Benjamin Price used to be a professor of ancient history, and as I mentioned, he was also a part of the Circle of Wise Men. These people had found the Book of the Dead, aka the Necronomicon Ex Mortis, and despite his warnings, the others read from the book and unleashed the Kandarian demon. Now, the first person we know who read from the Book of the Dead was Raymond Noby from the initial Evil Dead movies, who found the book in Castle Kandar and was trying to translate it from the cabin in the woods that Ash and friends visited. But the thing is, they also found the Kandarian dagger at the same spot as the book. And very curiously, Mr. Benjamin Price also talks about finding an article of great power, the Kandarian dagger, capable of stopping the Deadites. But the Kandarian dagger attracts the Deadites like moths to a flame because it was the only thing that could destroy them, so they want to destroy it. So Benjamin covered the dagger in rune and hex and hid it in his family home before leaving them in order to protect them, because he knew that the demon would come for him next. And I think Raymond Noby and his wife Henrietta were also a part of the Circle of Wise Men, much like Benjamin. and it is quite possible that all three of them together found the Book of the Dead and the Kandarian dagger. But let's come back to the present. You see, during his research, Joseph drops his pen, and while trying to find it back, he bumps into the dagger and uncovers it from its protective binding of rune and hex, which is what attracts Deadite Jessica in the first place. So, these two scenes with Jared and Leo at the lake and Joseph at his house happened simultaneously, and this is why Jessica waited at the roadside for hours for Will to arrive, which is exactly why she tells Will that she has found him and also talks about getting the dagger. But why couldn't Will see a whole-ass woman standing in the middle of the road? So let's rewind a bit. Now, Will and his wife Alice shared a rough marriage because Will was an abusive and controlling husband, but victims often stuck with their abusers, and so did Alice. But on that fateful night, he had had too much to drink and got into another fight with Alice before storming away in his car. He was already very drunk, and just as Deadite Jessica walked to the center of the road to cause the accident, Will's radio malfunctioned and his attention got divided, which is how he hit her. She then spoke the incantation, Kunda, Estrada, Montose, Kanda, and the next thing we know, Will was immolated alive. But Deadite Jessica did not really need to recite the incantation because the Deadites were already active, and I think she did it just for the sake of fanservice. Guess she knows that us mere mortals need to be pleased or else we'd stop coming to the theaters, and the future of Evil Dead would be, well, dead. But jokes apart, this scene meant that Will had also become a Deadite, and right before his cremation, Edgar opened the casket after hearing knocks from within the casket. And that's how Edgar became the second member of the family to become infected or possessed. After this, Alice comes with the Price family to that same house Joseph had been staying, and one by one each of the family members, including Joseph's girlfriend and the family dog, get possessed and die, until only Alice becomes the final girl. But that was not the end. Deadite Will returns at the end, and after much scuffle, Alice manages to kill her dead husband and finally becomes free of the Price family's curse. In fact, she even gets rescued by medics and first responders, who probably were alerted about the fire at the Price family home and were on their way there. But the thing is, Alice was still a Price and was not spared. You see, during the last scene where Alice and Deadite Will were fighting each other, she strikes him with the Kandarian dagger, and in a last-ditch effort to turn her, Deadite Will creates an illusion where he comes in his real form and not the fiery corpse form. He tells her that he loves her, and the two almost have a moment. So he basically wanted her to kiss him so that she turns into a Deadite too. In an earlier scene, we saw Mrs. Price getting infected by Mr. Price because of a kiss. When he says, "I love you," she simply tells him that that wasn't enough and destroys his remaining skull with her bare hands. And I think this act did something to her. Why do I say so? Well, in the very last scene before the credits roll, Alice's left eye had the same yellow color that we had been seeing in the eyes of all the newly formed Deadites. Yellow is the color of fire, and Alice has also been engulfed in that fire. Safe to say, Alice is one of the Deadites now. But more importantly, she is still in possession of the Kandarian dagger. I wonder how things will turn out to be moving from here, because if Alice has turned, which I very seriously think she has, the woman will try to destroy the dagger, and according to the lore of the movie, there's nothing else that can truly destroy a Kandarian demon. Having said that, there's a scene where Alice is attacked by Deadite Joseph. In that scene, she searches vigorously for the dagger and attacks him with multiple different ones. And one of them looks suspiciously similar to the Kandarian dagger from Evil Dead 2. Does this mean that there are, in fact, more than one Kandarian daggers? Does it mean that there are multiple different realities that are now canon in the Evil Dead franchise? Well, I guess only a sequel to Evil Dead Burn can tell us that. And as for the next Evil Dead movie, it's called Evil Dead Wrath, and is supposed to be a prequel set in 1972. While that was all before the credits rolled, the movie also had a couple of extra scenes, one darkly funny mid-credit and another one, a post-credit scene that is simply unmissable, because it once again connects this movie with its predecessor, that is Evil Dead Rise. The first one was not the bigger franchise tease, but it did round off the movie in a very sick little fashion. This mid-credits scene returned to the family's grandmother, who had fully become a Deadite by this point and was dragging her half-body across the road. She was on the side of the road when a girl driving on that road comes across her. She immediately stops the car to check if the old woman needed help, but Granny Deadite quickly puts on the character of a helpless old woman. And yes, the once forgetful and lucid octogenarian who was missing her torso had become a Hellcat with unimaginable strength for, and this creature claimed yet another victim, the first one being her own daughter-in-law. But the more important scene was the one that came at the very end. This scene moved back to the crematorium from earlier in the film, as in the one where Will had been brought. An employee took her young daughter through the place, and as they passed rows of unclaimed urns, the girl asked why so many were still there. Her mother explained that some families never came back for the ashes of their loved ones. Then the mother stepped out after hearing a knock and told the girl to stay where she was and not to touch anything. But then again, kids in horror movies are, well, kids in horror movies, and they hardly listen. Naturally, curiosity won. The child explored the shelves and found an urn with one very familiar name on it, Ellie Bixler. And as we know, she was the mum who became Evil Dead Rise's main Deadite after possession took hold of her. Then the lights flickered and the girl saw Deadite Ellie in the mirror. The child touched the glass, Ellie touched back, and then Deadite Ellie just traveled from one realm to another. She brutally killed the girl before telling us that Mommy is back. See, we know that Ellie had been destroyed in a wood chipper at the end of Evil Dead Rise, but her return only tells me that she was not completely destroyed, and that the evil within her simply went from one dimension to another. That's how she is now able to return in her full-fledged Deadite form. So yeah, Evil Dead Burn is a movie not just about horror, but also about how dysfunctional families could get. How there could be a mother who once was skillful and could have monetized it, but was forced to crush such dreams for the sake of her family. How that same mother could blind herself to the fact that her son is a wife-beater, and how the head of the family essentially deals with self-harm, despite putting on a tough guy image for the rest of the world. Then there's the kid who just can't pick himself up and is made to feel like a failure by one and all. The film is also about how families and communities treat strangers. And you know what? All these social commentaries were expected because co-writer and director Sebastian Vanacek is known to work on such stories. But I must say, this is only his second feature-length film, and Sam Raimi himself picked up Sebastian to make Burn. I am pretty sure that this guy is on his way to become the next Fede Alvarez, Lee Cronin, Robert Egger, Zach Kreger, if not Ryan Coogler. But that's just one jumble man's opinion. What do you think about Sebastian? Do you like his work? Well, you know where to have a healthy debate. So yeah, that was all in this one, guys, and if you liked the video, please consider hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Those 2 small clicks from you will help us tremendously in bringing you more of these marvelous videos. Stay safe and have a good one.